Okay, looks like we're on video 8, picking up on the Genocide series. This is video number 3. And we've kind of taken the black African American experience of Holocaust from 1492 up to the turn of the century, after quote unquote Emancipation Proclamation and our so-called or alleged end of chattel slavery of the 13th Amendment, which was in 1865, Emancipation Proclamation, which was 1863. And we have established that the exception clause of the Emancipation Proclamation actually perpetuated slavery. So we do know that per the 13th Amendment of the Constitution that the United States does believe in and currently practice slavery under the conditions of associated criminality. We have established through media several attempts at criminalizing the image of the black man. But a lot of my Native American brothers and sisters from Nevada are going to be joining us. So I want to make sure that I do proper respect to my natives. I appreciate everybody who educated me in the Native American experience when I lived in Nevada and was entrusted with a lot of information at different powwows and Native American gatherings where I was accepted and educated. So I want to really touch on that experience as well, because that was indeed a Holocaust that should not be forgotten and should be given the proper respect, and is part of the charges that should be brought against the United States to this day. And there are many writings, one being Alfred Crosby. Now, I believe that this particular author had sincere motives in his research. His research was more of an ecological, environmental history to explain the dynamics of what he called the Columbian exchange. And that was basically, he was an Atlantic historian, and the things that came from the old world to the new world, old world being the known world, Africa, Portuguese, Europe, that area, across the Atlantic, things that came and things that went back across. And one thing that we had discussed was it was an exchange in the anesthetized sense of the word, but obviously bad things came to the new world, riches came out of the new world. And one of the main focuses of Crosby's work that was original was he talked about the germs that came by. Now, there's a lot of arguments to come out of this, and hopefully we'll have time because we got about 6 minutes left. But the reason whites were not successful in conquering the new world because they were better, they were more intelligent, they had better weapons. That really wasn't it. The biggest thing was they had learned in Africa to domesticate animals. And a lot of history is written history. And to Europeans, that's the history that counts, is what was written. Well, that's the history that counts because that's what they did. They wrote down history. That was their quote unquote gift to the world, was the actual recording of history. So that's what's important to them. Africans have been domesticating animals before the white man has any recorded history being on Earth. But That was what they did. So when people said, like how we were taught, is that they brought these germs and diseases with them, it wasn't that because they were different people necessarily. It was because through going through the domestication process, they got different diseases from these animals that they had grown immune to, from having ox and donkeys and all of these particular animals, sheep, goats. See, there was no domestication in the Western world, in South America and North America. I think it was llamas and some other kind of animal, but they didn't use animals to till soil, that kind of thing. Well, it wasn't just the Europeans that came. When they came, they brought animals. Now, these animals had these diseases. And then the Africans, who had been domesticating animals forever, also had an immunity built up. So when all of them came over here, it was just death, just going through the Native Americans, right? Now, where the issue was, subsequent work to Crosby's really kind of bastardized his work, because he was just showing the ecological and biological changes. Because at the end of the book, he referred to himself as a biohistorian. That's what he was actually talking about. And he was actually trying to clarify that his work was not from a perspective of whites being superior as to why they ended up being on top. It was almost a perfect storm that created this happening. So, and then with further, there was a genealogical Atlantic history study by William O'Reilly that showed when a plague or a disease hits, it's usually the first 100 years that area is going to be devastated. And that was when the white man was coming. That's why they were saying if Genghis Khan had attacked Europe when right after the Black Plague hit, he'd have been successful because they were so weak at this time. But see, what happened was, when it hit, it wiped out the Indians, but also the Europeans got sick because different bugs and different diseases were coming from different parts of the country, because they brought African animals, they brought animals from India, animals from the Saudi area, animals from up north. So all these things are coming, and you had things like yellow fever, the mosquitoes. There was a writing about mosquitoes that we had reviewed, The Mosquito Empires, Ecology and War of the Greater Caribbean by J.R. McNeill. I had to do a bio on him and a paper on his book as to where when these diseases hit the colonized South America and North America, it was the yellow fever and malaria from the mosquitoes. Well, when they cleared all this land to start plantations, they changed the ecology of the United States lands, because they've moved all these trees. They've now created swamps and open area and things for these things to really breed. They began to not only be served as it being to their advantage against the Indians to take their land, it protected them, because the people who didn't die off, the Europeans that didn't die off, developed an immunity to it. And they passed that immunity to their children. This is that 100-year period we're talking about. So when Europeans came to attack them to take, because the Europeans would take from the Europeans, they didn't care. They would come, the Spanish would come and try to take from the Portuguese, or the Portuguese would come and try to take from the English. Well, when they would come over, they would get hit by this malaria and yellow fever that the Europeans who had been here 10, 15, 20, 50, 60 years, they had grown to be immune to it. passed it on to their kids. So many people that were coming to attack the Europeans that were here, the Europeans were protected by the diseases that kind of brought in this Columbian exchange, where all of this stuff came into the New World and the two ecologies hit, and it was devastation to each side. So we're setting the groundwork right now to show how the ecological and genealogical difference in coming from the Columbian Exchange in 1492 set the groundwork for the genocide of the Native Americans and the Mexicans that was not supported as a Holocaust, and to further develop the history of the United States in genocide. We're going to pick this up video 4.